So, Tony's right. How are you? I'm doing these back to back, essentially. So let's talk about like a video idea that I've had for a while. And it was something I've been talking to somebody about too. It's kind of like the poet that I thought I would be, and then the poet that I am now, entering my third year. So kind of like seeing my growth as a writer and wanting to kind of explore what that is. I kind of jogged my memory to talk about this again because I am going through my like portfolios. I'm trying to anyway. I got to get my other laptop fixed because a lot of stuff is trapped on that one. I didn't send it to myself or anything like that, which is like bad. But I was looking through my portfolios and I wanted to see like what poems that I had like stored and things like that. And so I have the stuff that I have from this semester, and then I think I have one more portfolio that I put on my Outlook through my campus email and stuff like that, that way, because I don't have Microsoft on my other laptop, which I was using before it broke. I didn't have it because I ain't paid a bill. I ain't paid that like subscription fee, so I was like, fuck it. So I started using it through my university email, which has like Microsoft Word and PowerPoint and stuff like that through there. But I didn't save as many things on there. I have a lot on this laptop, and when I tried to turn it on this past weekend, it didn't turn on because the hinge broke. So I guess it may have also affected the ability to display and all that kind of stuff. So I have to figure out how to like figure out how much it's going to cost to like fix that, because I want to get the stuff off of there. So in the meantime, I have my current portfolio of stuff that I'm working on this semester. I have to turn it in. I have one portfolio from like 2020, like this past spring semester, I think. I have that. And then I have the portfolio that I applied for the university, applied to the program with. And so I started going through the poems because I was like, during the break, I have to come up with 25 poems total. You can go a little bit over and stuff like that, like, you know, one or two over. But I need to have the 25. This semester, you'll have like 15 of them if you decide to use them all, right? Because you could decide to use none of them and have to just do everything from scratch. But I was like, girl, I ain't doing all that shit. So like, I don't want to make 25 poems from scratch. I think I've written to concept enough for the poems that I have this semester that at least a third, if not 2/3 of them could go in this collection. And then I'll be able to write towards the rest. So yeah, that's it. So I have this final thesis compilation document, and so I'm looking at all the poems and stuff like that I've edited and put in here, and I'm just throwing in the ones that I like from this semester. And then, like I said, I went back and I started looking at my portfolio that I applied to the university with, and I really like I really enjoyed the poems that I had for my freaking like thing, like my portfolio, and I was like, wow, like why did I stop like doing this? And it's not like I didn't have any improvements to make or anything like that, but in looking at it, I was kind of like, I feel like I just had a more emotionally honest portfolio than I do now. Like, I'm getting towards that emotional openness that I kind of had back then. And also, the one thing that I decided to do away with was like making my poems like the circuitous like riddle type thing, because one of the things in poetry and in writing in general, especially if you go the MFA academia route, is that a lot of the writing, when it comes to being able to communicate to like the layperson that's outside of the MFA space or outside of the academia like space, one thing that we like struggle with is our ability to write things that connect with the audiences sometimes. And particularly poetry is like always held to the standard of like, it's got to be like super beyond your comprehension. And a lot of people find writing poetry and reading poetry to be like a particularly hard task. And I've been in classes where like, because I'm interacting with other people on other tracks, the main thing that they always say, and they preface it, which kind of disappoints me because I kind of feel like going into it, I feel like I'm not going to get good feedback or helpful feedback for my writing because they've already shut down and like, well, I don't really get poetry. Like, I'm not a poet, like, and stuff like that. But I'm like, I'm not a fucking fiction writer really, or memoirist like that. Like, I'm not that heavy and deep into it just yet. But I still have to give you stuff, and I'm like, why can't you do that for me? That's a little like rant and great, but that idea that poetry is so far away from people, and like, you know, you're gonna read something like apples and butterflies, and then like suddenly arrive at like some philosophy about life, and like I couldn't see it, and that's how people think that poetry is, and that's how they categorize. That's what they think poets are, and it's almost like if you're very clear as a poet, it's almost like, damn, I'm not like what, kind of like surprised. And I realized going into the program that I felt like I needed to be this very like clever, haha, kind of like you didn't get the riddle, kind of like poet, and that just wasn't honest and open. And that stuffiness of what you think a poet is, the academia kind of poetry, is really like, to be honest, the more I read it, the more I'm just like, this means nothing. Oh Lord. But like, dealing with poetry, like, I feel like there's an emotional honesty that you have to have, even if it's like a persona, like some sort of honesty about what you want. And one of the things for me is that this poetry collection that's going to be my thesis, is really like me, kind of like me, persona me, and being honest. And I want a good characterization so that you get to know who I am and what I'm thinking about and like all that kind of stuff. And you have to be a little bit more open about that kind of stuff, and I can't riddle it away. What I can do is have really nice lines and good language and stuff like that. And I kind of realize also, I'm not big on using a whole bunch of words that like I barely know. And I kind of like don't like to build a context around like, how can I say it? I'm not a poet who's gonna write something based off of like the nativity scene. Like, I'm not gonna write something that is in that kind of vein and alludes to that. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of like also movie, like filmmakers, screenwriters are big on this. They are big on like, the movie is really just Adam and Eve. The movie is really just Noah's Ark. The movie, and it's usually like biblical shit. It's like, it's just the Garden of Eden, the fall from grace. It's really that, but it's couched and wrapped up and like these characters, and like only if you can really get it can you like access, you know. I don't want that. Like, I think I want to be accessible enough that you can read the poem and feel like you have gone through a journey with the speaker and that it means something at the end, and you don't have to be left lingering like with this feeling of like, damn, like, you know, like I kind of feel like I'm perfectly okay with people reading it and being like, okay, and then like moving on, like, because I know that this is only one collection I'm making, but two, I also just feel like I'm okay with the poetry being like emotionally honest and almost explicit. And when I mean explicit, is just mean clear. Like, I just wanted to be clear, and I think that clarity is something that I didn't have going into it. But reading my stuff for my poetry portfolio that I submitted, I do like the more fantastical, surreal, because surreal elements here that I do miss. I do miss some of these more fantastical elements. And in many ways, I want to get back to that a little bit. And so it's kind of funny because these are the things that I use self-publish. And I'm going to completely rework all of them, stuff like that. But I use them to get into school. And I'm like, I'm using them. I might use a few of them to get out. That's how I'm looking at it. But just edit it. And I think that also the theme of dealing with body and me, I feel like some of these poems that I wrote to get into the school actually fit. And so now it's just like I want to finish my this would now be my 5th out of 6th semester, and go and get the other stuff from the portfolios. And I probably won't be using a lot because from what I remember, I don't think I had a whole bunch of stuff that I really feel like would go in this collection. But I'm gonna like see. I need to see. So yeah, there was just that gap of who I thought it was going to be, which is like this concealed poet that lives in metaphor and all this kind of shit, and then like realizing I should probably be a little bit more emotionally honest. But you know, when it comes to things and just like lay it out and just say it. But then also it's kind of like because I wrote my Ars Poetica poem. We had to do one of those, and I had a theme in mind of how it works, Ars Poetica, and like one person was like, well, why did you do it then? And it's just like it was more a persona poem than like anything, and I just didn't bother like explaining it because like the first few weeks of like workshop really were getting on my fucking nerves. I'm not gonna they were getting on my fucking nerves anyway, because it's just like it's a persona type thing. It's not like personally me, and I feel like Ars Poetica, it's supposed to be a poem about writing poetry, and it's like, well, I want the idea of what it may feel like for somebody who finds it difficult, or you have to consider all these factors, and maybe like the you that you have to be to write a poem is so far away from the you that writes, because the poem was playing with the expectation of the reader and then placing that onto the writer, who then feels resentment about that, which is sometimes me, but also I think is getting at the idea that people have certain perceptions about what poetry is, and it's usually the classics, it's usually a sonnet, it's usually a Shakespeare, and there's just a wider world of poetry. Like even someone who's doing confessional poetry, like Sylvia Plath or something like that, even that is heavily couched in like this academia kind of like world, even though it's seeking to break away from some of that shit. And so yeah, like that's what that Ars Poetica poem was trying to do. And then I rewrote it in a smart ass way, kind of like it's not therapy, it's not depression, it's not madness, it's like it's just writing, because it's also not that deep sometimes. Like just, you know, like just read the poem and be okay. Like if you're somebody who reads stuff and everything has to be like a metaphor or an open door discussion for something else, and you can't just sit with like the facts are the facts that it's just this, then I want to like ask you why, you know? Like, I want to ask why, right? Because it's almost like when you're talking to someone and, you know, you ask, how are you doing? And they say, fine. And then you start going off of like the subtext of like, oh, but their tone was like this. And then you turned away, and then they walked away really quickly, and then this and that. And they just said, fine. And it's like, okay, if you know the person well enough, and you know this is kind of off, you can ask. But some people are just inventing things and putting hurdles in their way, and almost putting hurdles in the way of just being able to read the shit, and a fear of getting it wrong. And then also the writer is also going through their own anxieties of, can I communicate this? And, you know, there's this gap. So, yeah, I'm working through that as a writer, and we really have 1 more month to go, essentially. So, there's that. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. Yeah, thanks for watching. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.